When we speak of the empath, the one whose soul seems woven from the finest, most fragile threads of sensitivity, we are not merely describing a simple trait of character. We are touching upon an existential condition, a way of being that few truly understand. It is as if a psychic wound, carved into the depths of the self, has been reshaped into something luminous, something resembling a gift. To live as an empath is to inhabit a world where the boundaries between oneself and others grow thin, almost transparent, leaving the heart exposed. It is like stepping into an invisible current, dissolving into an atmosphere so subtle that one no longer breathes only one's own emotions, but inhales and exhales the feelings of everyone else nearby. And yet, this very gift, the brilliance that makes the empath radiant, also renders them vulnerable, even threatening, in the eyes of those who profess love but secretly carry envy within their hearts. That envy gnaws silently, eroding the foundations of trust. And let us not underestimate envy. It belongs among the darkest of emotions. Unlike admiration, which uplifts, or desire, which simply yearns, envy corrodes. It resents. It poisons. It looks upon light not with awe, but with hostility, seeking either to extinguish the flame or bury it under shadow so that it no longer shines. In the context of relationships, envy rarely stands naked in the open. Who would confess, even to themselves, that they begrudge the very person they claim to love? Instead, envy emerges quietly, like tiny shards of ice forming on glass, subtle, sharp, and easily overlooked at first. It hides in tones of voice, in the sudden withdrawal of warmth, in a careless remark delivered as if in jest, but cutting like a knife beneath the surface. For envy is a force born of shadow, and shadows, as we know, do not march boldly into the light. They creep. They disguise. They slip behind masks woven from tender words and gestures of affection. Thus, those who say they love you may unconsciously strive to dim your radiance, to cloud the brightness of your presence, simply because the mirror you hold before them reflects something they cannot bear, the poverty of their own spirit, the limits of their emotional depth, and the silent terror of intimacy they claim to crave. For the empath, this so-called gift is not something chosen. It is destiny. It is the mark of a soul whose protective membrane was torn open too early, often by pain, rejection, or abandonment. A child raised in a household where love was conditional or painfully absent learns survival in the most delicate of ways. They train themselves to notice every subtle shift of mood, every flicker of expression, because their safety depends on it. Over time, they cultivate a sixth sense, the ability to feel what others feel even before those others recognize it themselves. They learn to anticipate, to appease, to absorb. And this adaptation forged in suffering later appears as a radiant capacity for compassion. But here lies the paradox. What was once born as a desperate survival strategy slowly transforms into a double-edged reality. A blessing and a curse interwoven within adult life. The very ability that kept the child alive becomes the very trait that defines the empath's destiny, an open channel to the hearts of others. For the empath carries an open wound that others both long to drink from, and at the same time secretly despise because it exposes them in ways they cannot endure. Those who envy the empath do not covet wealth, nor beauty, nor even accomplishment. Instead, they envy something far more elusive, the soul's inner light, that rare and unfiltered capacity to sense truth in its raw immediacy. What unsettles them is the authenticity of one who cannot help but live within the immediacy of emotion, immersed in the tides of the collective unconscious. There is, unavoidably, an ancient archetype that governs this unfolding drama. It is the archetype of the wounded healer, one who, by virtue of their own wound, can bring healing to others. Yet this same wound becomes a magnet, drawing in those who wish to siphon the healing for themselves while refusing to acknowledge the cost it demands. Such people often come cloaked in the guise of affection, approaching as lovers, friends, or confidants. But what they truly desire is not genuine intimacy. They seek to partake of your essence, to bask in the warmth of your sensitivity, and then, once filled, to turn against you, resenting the mirror you have held up to their emptiness. And here again, let us not underestimate envy. It is not simply jealousy, for jealousy still carries the urge to possess. Envy is far more corrosive. Envy wishes to destroy. If your light burns too brightly, the envious one feels compelled to dim it, for your radiance serves as a cruel reminder of the darkness they cannot escape within themselves. Thus, they weave a dangerous illusion, love wrapped with subtle sabotage. They withhold affirmation when you most need it. They mock the depth of your emotions, or they reduce the very qualities that define you. How many empaths have been told, "You are too sensitive, you think too much, you dramatize"? Yet beneath these words lies an unconscious confession. Your sensitivity unsettles them because it unveils the truths they can't bear to see. In this way, the empath becomes not merely a companion, but a mirror, and when others gaze into it, rather than rejoicing in what it reflects, they often recoil, trembling in resentment. Consider, for example, the dream motif of the banquet. One enters a grand hall filled with tables, laughter, and abundance, but upon sitting down, the dreamer finds the plates empty, or worse, filled with ashes. This is the archetypal image of false love, love that offers the promise of nourishment, yet delivers only emptiness. For the empath, such a dream is not confined to sleep. It often becomes lived reality. They are invited into closeness, welcomed with the language of intimacy. Yet beneath the surface, the so-called beloved feeds upon their soul, while giving back nothing in return. And when the empath's light rises, when their natural radiance spills into the room, envy spreads like smoke through the banquet hall, turning joy to ashes. This is why so many empaths remain caught in confusion. They wonder, why do those I love grow cold? Why is the warmth I pour out not returned to me in kind? The painful answer is clear. Envy has infected the bond. The very light that drew the other to you now becomes intolerable, for it exposes the depth of their pretense. What once appeared as charm now feels unbearable, because envy cannot coexist with genuine love. Love, by its nature, rejoices in the being of another. Envy, by contrast, resents it. Love seeks to nurture and protect. Envy seeks to diminish, to reduce, to wound. And so, the empath, unless they awaken to this truth, becomes ensnared in a tragic cycle, giving, absorbing, healing, and then, in return, being punished for the very gift they offer. But let us go deeper. Why do empaths stir envy in those who only pretend to love them? It is not simply because they feel with great depth. It is because they embody a truth most people spend their lives fleeing. The modern human being, shielded by persona and armored with masks, has grown used to living at a safe distance from their own inner depths. To encounter an empath is to stand before a living reminder that the soul is still alive, fragile, exposed, and vulnerable. How many can truly bear that? Thus, envy rises as a defense of the shallow self, a rebellion of the false persona against the mirror of authenticity. The persona, threatened and trembling, whispers in the unconscious, "Destroy this one, for they reveal what I have lost." And so envy emerges as the shadow's rebellion against the call to individuation. The empath's challenge is not only relational, it is archetypal. They embody the figure of the sacrificer, the lamb who takes upon themselves the emotions of others. This role radiates with something Christ-like in its brilliance, yet it carries within it a perilous naivete. For to carry the emotions of others without discernment is to open oneself to possession, to what might be called vampirism of the soul. And when those who claim love secretly harbor envy, they become such vampires, feeding on the empath's sensitivity while resenting them for having it. Here I must offer a caution. The empath must learn boundaries, not walls, for walls betray the very essence of empathy, but sacred thresholds. The soul cannot be endlessly drained by those who envy what they can never create within themselves. Boundaries, then, are not acts of cruelty. They are acts of recognition, acknowledgments that the gift must be preserved if it is ever to fulfill its higher purpose. Without such boundaries, the empath risks being devoured by envy disguised as love. With them, the empath becomes a beacon, shining without apology and offering to others a glimpse of the path they too might walk, if only they dare to confront their own shadow. In myth, there is the image of Narcissus, who could not love anyone because he was entranced by his own reflection. But less often told is the sorrowful tale of the one who loved Narcissus, the nymph Echo, who withered away because her love was not reciprocated. The empath often plays the role of Echo, giving voice to the needs of others, reflecting their moods, their longings, their wounds, yet fading slowly, because the love they receive is one-sided. And what happens when Narcissus gazes upon Echo? He envies her capacity to feel, but he cannot return it, for he remains trapped forever in his own shallow reflection. And so, he offers nothing but emptiness, while secretly despising the vitality of the one who loves him. Thus envy and false love entwine, wrapping themselves around the empath like twin serpents. It is no surprise, then, that dreams of drowning are so common among empaths. Again and again they report the same haunting visions, waters rising swiftly around them, the sensation of being submerged, and the desperate struggle to save others from the flood, even as their own breath slips away. What could be more telling? These dreams reveal the psyche's urgent warning. The waters of feeling are becoming overwhelming, and if boundaries are not drawn with care, one's very identity may begin to dissolve under the weight of what others project. Those who envy you would gladly allow you to drown in their turbulent waters, for your drowning absolves them from confronting the depth of their own pain. They will call it love. They will thank you for your sacrifice. Yet beneath the words of gratitude lies a darker truth. They quietly rejoice that your light is dimmed because it makes their own shadow less visible. To awaken from this tragic pattern is to reclaim the wound that shaped you as an empath, not as a curse, but as a calling. One must look directly into the shadow, into the tender pain of the child who once learned to absorb everything just to survive, and declare, I will no longer be consumed. I will feel, but I will not be drained. I will love, but I will not allow envy to disguise itself as devotion. This awakening is nothing less than individuation for the empath, to recognize the archetype of the wounded healer within and to transform it into the healer who first heals themselves. If you find yourself repeatedly triggering envy in those who say they love you, pause to understand. You are a mirror. You reveal to them what they have denied, and for that, they resent you. But their envy is not your burden. It is theirs to carry. To take it upon yourself is to betray your own essence. Yes, you may hold compassion, but you must not sacrifice your soul to appease another's shadow. Instead, let their envy become your teacher. Let it sharpen your discernment. Let it ignite the fire that forges your sacred boundaries. Only then can your empathy rise as a conscious gift, rather than remain an unconscious wound. When I speak of envy in those who pretend to love you, I must emphasize that it often hides in silence, concealed from ordinary awareness. The envious rarely confess, even to themselves, that they harbor resentment toward your sensitivity. Instead, it emerges in subtle, almost imperceptible interruptions, as though they are scattering the rhythm of your inner music. You may be sharing something deeply felt, offering words born from sincerity, and suddenly they laugh, not with you, but at you, breaking the flow of your truth. They tell you that you are too much, or that you are only imagining what you feel. These small daggers may seem insignificant, but they accumulate, and they wound you not because you believe the words, but because they come from the very lips that whisper love. In the end, it is not the stranger who destroys the empath. It is the one who enters under the guise of affection. The psychological root of this dynamic lies in projection. Every human being carries within them a shadow, a hidden reservoir of repressed desires, disappointments, failures, and inadequacies. And when such a person stands in the presence of an empath, something begins to stir in their unconscious. They see in you not only your luminous gift, but also a painful reminder of what they have refused to nurture, what they have avoided developing in themselves. And because the psyche resists what it cannot yet integrate, it instinctively attacks. The easiest escape from responsibility is to project it elsewhere. Thus, they cast weakness onto you. They tell you that you are fragile, unstable, too emotional, or even broken. Yet the irony is striking. It is they who are fragile. For they cannot endure the raw truths that you encounter and embrace each day as part of your very existence. In the collective psyche, envy reveals itself as a serpent. This is no accident. Since ancient times, the serpent has stood as a symbol of paradox, both wisdom and poison, transformation and destruction. And envy slithers in silence, winding itself subtly between two people until it coils tightly around the bond, constricting, suffocating, stealing the breath of love itself. How many empaths have asked themselves, why does love that began with admiration turn, over time, into something cold, controlling, even cruel? The answer lies here. Admiration, when touched by shadow, inevitably transforms into resentment. The very qualities that first drew them near, your tenderness, your intuitive depth, your unguarded openness, become unbearable reminders of what they cannot face in themselves. To understand this, let us borrow an image from alchemy, for alchemy is the symbolic language of psychic transformation. The alchemist spoke of the negrito, the blackening stage in which the old self dissolves in darkness. This blackening, though painful, is necessary for the birth of gold. Yet many resist it. They refuse descent into the depths. They cling desperately to the mask of persona and will not risk breaking the surface of their own shadow. When such a one encounters an empath, it is as though the empath radiates the very negrito they are fleeing. You become, without trying, the living reminder of the work they must do. And rather than face this descent, they turn their eyes upon you with envy, for you are proof that such descent is survivable. You feel deeply, yet you endure. You do not shatter in the presence of grief. Instead, you transmute it into compassion, into something luminous. And this, more than anything, threatens them, for it unmasks their avoidance. It reveals their flight from authenticity. The envy of the false lover carries a peculiar sting. It hides beneath tenderness. It speaks with the words of affection, but its actions are laced with diminishment. This duality confuses the empath, for the heart longs to believe the words, yet the deeds whisper another darker story. It is a split, an inner contradiction, and that contradiction is precisely how envy operates. It rarely destroys openly, for that would reveal itself too clearly. Instead, it works covertly, gnawing in secret, like a moth feeding quietly on the fabric of a garment. And then, one day, when you reach for it, the cloth you trusted falls apart in your hands. You may have noticed dreams where you are given gifts wrapped in beautiful paper, the ribbons shining with promise, only to unwrap them and discover there is nothing inside. Or worse, something rotten hidden beneath the glitter. Such images are not random. This is the psyche's way of revealing to you the nature of false love. Love that arrives cloaked in sweet words, but holds no true substance. Love that carries poison, though it may be wrapped in gold. And when you awaken from such dreams, you must not dismiss them as mere fancy or fleeting illusion. They are revelations. They are the unconscious speaking with urgency, whispering, "Beware of the one who cloaks envy in the language of care." For the pain of the empath is sharpened by their unrelenting longing for authenticity. You crave a love that celebrates rather than diminishes, a bond where sensitivity is not treated as a weakness to be hidden, but as a gift to be cherished. And so, you remain, waiting, hoping, believing the other might one day change, that they might awaken to the truth of your gift. But envy is not easily stirred from its slumber. It festers in the dark, hiding behind masks, clinging to the safety of denial. Those who pretend to love rarely confront their own shadows, for to do so would require dismantling the mask they have so carefully constructed. Why do they pretend? Because need and resentment have become bound together within them. They need your light, your presence, your warmth. Yet they resent your radiance, despise the very glow they cannot create within themselves. They drink from your well with thirst, but then curse you for revealing their emptiness. And here lies the tragic paradox of false love. The one who pretends cannot release you, for they crave the nourishment of your soul. Yet they cannot truly embrace you either, because your very existence exposes what they most fear, their own hollowness. And so, the empath finds themselves caught in a ceaseless dance with envy. You give, they take. You shine, they dim you. You forgive, they wound again. The cycle repeats itself with cruel precision until the moment of awakening arrives, until you recognize that you are not merely entangled in one person's behavior, but caught in the threads of a larger collective pattern. This is not just your personal story. It is an ancient drama that has echoed across centuries. It is the story of Cain and Abel, where Abel's innocence and favor provoke Cain's envy, leading to destruction. It is the myth of Joseph and his brothers, where the dreamer's gift awakens hatred in those who cannot bear his vision. These stories endure because they unveil the archetype of truth. Those who embody light often awaken envy in those unwilling to awaken themselves. Yet, we must resist the temptation to sink into victimhood. The empath is not condemned to suffer endlessly in this pattern. You are called to consciousness, invited to see with clarity rather than with bitterness, for the very wound that made you an empath can also become the source of wisdom if you can recognize envy for what it truly is. You can refuse to carry it. You can speak the liberating words, "This is not mine. I do not exist to bear the burden of another's shadow. I exist to become whole." Individuation requires this refusal, this firm turning away from what was never yours to carry. For as long as you absorb envy disguised as love, you remain trapped in the persona of the sacrificer, playing roles that others project upon you instead of embracing the fullness of your own self. Only when you withdraw your consent to be drained, only when you stop allowing yourself to be consumed by what was never true love, do you begin to sense the opening of another path. Only when you step back from false love do you enter the path of true transformation. Then your empathy, which once felt like an unconscious wound, begins to take form as a conscious vocation, a gift that you carry with intention. This will not be easy, for the false lover does not let go quietly. They will accuse you of betrayal. They will say you are cold, that you have changed, that you are selfish. They will call you cruel for refusing the role they depended upon you to play. But recognize this language for what it truly is. It is not truth. It is the cry of envy as it loses its host, the desperate gasp of a shadow that fears exposure. It is a last attempt to keep you bound in the chains of self-sacrifice. Do not be deceived by it. To set boundaries is not cruelty. To say no is not a sin. It is truth. It is clarity. It is the act of honoring the divine spark within you. And that spark must never be extinguished simply to soothe the discomfort of another's shadow. The archetype of the empath has long been bound to the archetype of the martyr. Yet you are not called to endless martyrdom. Even in the Garden of Gethsemane, Christ himself set the boundary. Not my will, but thine. He chose the cross not because others demanded it, not to serve the envy of those around him, but because it was his path toward individuation, his fulfillment of the self. So too must the empath learn to distinguish between sacrifice that arises from a divine vocation and sacrifice that arises only from unconscious compulsion. The former has the power to transform the world. The latter merely feeds the hunger of envy, leaving your soul diminished. If you continue to give where envy rules unchecked, your spirit will wither. But if you step back, if you honor the sacredness of your own being, something remarkable occurs. Envy loses its grip, for envy cannot survive in the presence of one who refuses to be diminished. It feeds on your compliance. It thrives on your silence, yes. But when you speak, when you shine without apology, it begins to falter. Like smoke that dissolves in the air, envy retreats into the nothingness from which it came. You may ask in your heart, what then of love? If I refuse false love, do I resign myself to loneliness? The answer is no, for when you withdraw from false love, you create the space where true love may finally enter. True love does not envy. It delights in your existence. It rejoices when you shine brighter, for your radiance awakens its own. True love is rare, but it is real, and it becomes visible only when you no longer confuse envy with devotion. In such moments of awakening, the psyche often speaks in images of flight. The empath who has been drowning suddenly dreams of wings, of rising above the waters, of seeing the world from a height never before imagined. This is the psyche's way of affirming that freedom is possible, that your sensitivity does not bind you to endless suffering, but can instead become the very wind that carries you toward destiny. Thus, I tell you again, envy is not your master. It is a shadow's rebellion, a phantom that vanishes when you stand in your own truth. You are not fragile, though they will call you so. You are not too much, though they will accuse you of excess. You are the mirror of what they refuse to see, and your task is not to dull the mirror, not to blur its reflection, but to hold it steadily and clearly, even if they turn away in discomfort. In this act of courage, you begin to embody the archetype of the sovereign empath, the one who feels deeply, yet stands firmly, the one who loves truly, yet refuses the chains of pretense, who recognizes that authenticity is the only ground where love can endure, who gives generously, yet guards their essence as sacred. And when you do, envy will no longer trigger confusion within you. Instead, you will see it for exactly what it is, a signal, a signpost, a reminder of the strength and brilliance of your own light. There is a peculiar alchemy at work whenever an empath encounters envy disguised as love. It is as though two opposing forces are irresistibly drawn together, your openness, your willingness to feel colliding with the other's refusal to feel. The result is a psychic tension, a pressure that can either transform both souls or shatter the bond entirely. And if transformation is resisted, if the shadow is denied, then destruction inevitably follows. This is why many empaths carry within them a trail of broken relationships, not because they are incapable of love, but because they awaken something powerful in others, something those others would rather keep buried in the dark. You stir the unconscious, and the unconscious rarely stirs without consequence. Imagine for a moment that the human psyche is like a vast cathedral. In most people, only the front nave is lit, the persona, the socially acceptable mask, the roles displayed without fear. But the deeper chambers, the crypts, the hidden alcoves remain cloaked in darkness. Few dare to wander there. Few even wish to acknowledge that such chambers exist. The empath, however, enters relationships not only carrying a candle, but bearing a torch. Your very presence illuminates corners others have spent entire lifetimes avoiding. And this is precisely why they become envious. For when you light the shadows, you show them what they have denied, and in that moment of exposure, they feel both threatened and diminished. Envy is not always expressed through open hostility. More often, it comes in quieter forms, in subtle undermining. It may appear as a sigh when you share your joy, as silence when you long for affirmation, or as a sudden distraction when you reveal your heart. Each act on its own may seem small, almost insignificant, but taken together they form a pattern, a deliberate dimming of your flame, a gradual attempt to make your radiance less visible. And because you feel so deeply, you notice, you sense it even when no words are spoken. You feel the subtle withdrawal, the unspoken resentment, and it pierces you more sharply than any outright rejection ever could. This is the empath's curse, to detect even what remains hidden, to hear what has never been said aloud. Many of you have had dreams of being chased, not by faceless monsters, but by people you know. And in these dreams, you run, not because you are weak, but because you sense something unsettling, that the one who smiles at you by day harbors something predatory by night. This is envy in its dream form. It is the psyche's way of showing you, through symbol and image, what your waking mind resists. You are the mirror of what they refuse to see, and your task is not to dull the mirror, not to soften its reflection, but to hold it steadily and truthfully, even if they turn away in discomfort or denial. In doing this, you begin to embody the archetype of the sovereign empath, the one who feels deeply yet stands firmly, the one who loves truly yet refuses the chains of pretense, who knows that love without truth is no love at all, who gives generously yet guards their essence as sacred. And when you do, envy will no longer bring confusion or self-doubt into your heart. Instead, you will see it for exactly what it is: a signal, a signpost, a reminder of the strength of your own light. There is a peculiar alchemy at work whenever an empath encounters envy wrapped in the language of love. It is as though two opposing forces are drawn together with irresistible force. Your openness, your willingness to feel, colliding with the other's refusal to feel. The result is a psychic tension, an unseen pressure that can either transform both souls or fracture the bond entirely. If transformation is resisted, if shadow is denied, then destruction inevitably follows. This is why many empaths carry within them a trail of broken relationships, not because they are unworthy of love, not because they are incapable of it, but because they awaken something in others that those others would rather keep buried. You stir the unconscious, and the unconscious rarely stirs without consequence. Imagine for a moment that the human psyche is like a vast cathedral. In most, Only the front nave is lit, the persona, the acceptable mask, the roles one may display without fear. But deeper inside are chambers, crypts, and alcoves that remain cloaked in shadow. Few dare to wander there. Few even wish to acknowledge those depths. The empath, however, enters relationships carrying not only a candle but a blazing torch. Your very presence illuminates corners others have spent a lifetime avoiding. And this is why envy arises. For when you shine light into the shadows, you reveal what they have denied, and in that sudden illumination, they feel both threatened and diminished. Envy does not always roar openly. More often, it creeps quietly, arriving in subtle undermining. It may be a sigh when you share your joy, a silence when you seek affirmation, a sudden distraction when you reveal your heart. Each act on its own seems trivial, almost dismissible, yet together they form a pattern, a deliberate dimming of your flame, a gradual erosion of your radiance. And because you feel so deeply, you notice, you sense the shift, even when no words are spoken. You feel the quiet withdrawal, the hidden resentment, and it pierces you more sharply than any overt rejection. This is the empath's curse. To detect even the unspoken, to hear in the silence what others dare not confess. Many of you have dreamed of being chased, not by faceless monsters, but by people you know. And in those dreams, you do not run because you are weak. You run because you sense the truth, that the one who smiles at you by day carries something predatory by night. This is envy in its dream form, the psyche's attempt to reveal what your waking mind resists, the truth that hides behind the mask. In myth, we see this most vividly in the figure of Psyche. She was loved by Eros, but only in darkness, for he feared that if she truly saw him, she would discover his hidden form. Yet Psyche's soul longed for vision, for truth, for the light that strips away illusion, and so, when she lit the lamp to gaze upon him, the veil was torn away, the illusion shattered, and she was cast into a series of trials that tested her very essence. This is the empath's journey. You love, but you also see. And when you see, those who envy you recoil, for your vision unmasks them in ways they cannot bear. Yet it is only through seeing, through daring to illuminate what lies hidden, that you can begin to free yourself. Consider also the archetype of the mirror. To love an empath is to look into a mirror that does not flatter or distort. You do not reflect the carefully constructed persona, but the soul itself. And how many truly can bear such an unfiltered reflection? They would rather shatter the mirror than confront what it reveals. Envy, therefore, becomes the hammer they raise against you, hoping to silence the image that unsettles them. But remember this, a mirror cannot be destroyed simply by being denied. Whether it is gazed upon or avoided, it still reflects. Even if they turn away, you remain what you are. The path forward requires immense courage, for when you step out of the dance of envy, you will feel the raw loneliness of standing fully in your own truth. You will no longer be sustained by the fleeting illusion of false love. You will no longer soothe or appease those who secretly resent you. Yet in that loneliness, something new and extraordinary is revealed. You discover a strength that was always there but long concealed. You realize that your sensitivity is not weakness, but initiation, a doorway into deeper authenticity. You come to see that you are not here to be everyone's caretaker, not destined to endlessly absorb what others cannot face, but to become whole within yourself. This is individuation, the profound process by which the soul claims its own fullness, not by pleasing others, not by dimming your light, but by embracing the totality of what you are. And for the empath, individuation means reclaiming the wound of childhood, the wound that once taught you to survive by absorbing the pain and shadows of others. and transmuting it into conscious choice. You choose when to feel, when to give, when to open, and when to preserve your essence. You choose rather than being compelled by unconscious survival. And in this very choice lies freedom. The false lover, when confronted with your awakening, will not understand. They will accuse you of betrayal. They will call you selfish, cold, distant. They will say, "You have changed." But you must see through this charade. They do not mourn you. They mourn the loss of their supply. They grieve not the absence of your love, but the disappearance of the convenience of your self-sacrifice. Do not be deceived. Their words are not truth, but the lament of the shadow, crying out because it has lost its grip. At this stage, many empaths report dreams of doors, sometimes locked, sometimes ajar, sometimes flung wide open. These dreams are not random. They are symbols of the threshold of individuation. To step through such a door is to leave behind the endless cycle of envy and false love. It is to enter a space where empathy is no longer carried as a wound, but lived as a gift. And though the threshold may appear frightening, beyond it lies authenticity. Beyond it lies a life where you no longer confuse diminishment with devotion. I tell you this not to harden your heart, but to awaken it. For true love does exist. It is rare, but it is real. True love is not envious. It delights in your light, not because it wishes to possess it, but because your light reminds it of its own. True love does not drain, it nourishes. It does not resent, it rejoices. And when you encounter it, you will know, for it will never ask you to shrink, to diminish, or to dim yourself. Instead, it will invite you to expand, to become more, to shine more brightly. Until that moment arrives, you must become the vigilant guardian of your own soul. You must hold your empathy as sacred, not a currency to be squandered on those who pretend, but a treasure to be entrusted only to those who honor its depth. For only then will you fulfill your destiny, not as a victim of envy's shadow, but as a vessel of truth. And perhaps in time, even those who once envied you may begin to awaken. Perhaps your refusal to be drained will serve as a silent mirror, forcing them to confront their own emptiness. Perhaps they too will descend into the negredo, into the darkness they fear, and there discover their own capacity to feel. But whether they ever choose this path is not your burden to carry. Your task is different. Your task is to walk the path of individuation, to bear your light with dignity, and to remember always, envy is the shadow's cry, not the measure of your worth. When you understand the true nature of envy in those who only pretend to love you, a profound shift occurs. You begin to see that what you have endured is not merely a personal misfortune, but a universal mystery. It belongs to the timeless struggle between light and shadow, between authenticity and pretense. The empath stands directly at the fault line of this tension. You are both blessed and burdened by the truth that your soul refuses to live in the shallow waters where so many are content to linger. You are called instead into the depths, and by entering those depths, you inevitably expose the avoidance of those around you. Envy then becomes the natural, if tragic, reaction of the shallow self when confronted with depth. It is the mask that sneers at the face behind it. Across cultures and throughout history, this dynamic has been told in story and myth. In Greece, it was Orpheus, whose music opened hearts and softened even the gates of Hades, yet whose gift also left him vulnerable to betrayal. In the Hebrew story, it was Joseph, the dreamer, despised and betrayed by his brothers because his visions implied favor. In the Christian mystery, it was Christ himself, whose radiance provoked envy among those who clung to power and pretense. These figures stand as archetypes of the empath, carriers of light, whose very presence awakens envy in those who live behind masks. And just as they were tested, so too must you be. For the danger of the empath is not only the wound inflicted by others' envy, but the far deeper wound of internalizing it. When you begin to believe the accusations of those who pretend to love you, you betray yourself. You begin to whisper inwardly, "Perhaps I am too much. Perhaps my sensitivity is weakness. Perhaps my longing for authenticity is foolish, even naive." This is the true poison envy seeks to plant within you. For envy knows its greatest victory is not in silencing your light from the outside, but in convincing you to silence yourself. The outer voice becomes the inner critic, and soon the empath begins to police their own light, dimming it before anyone else has the chance to do so. This is how envy survives across generations, not only in the actions or words of others, but in the silent work of the inner saboteur. It plants seeds that grow into self-doubt, and it leaves behind scars invisible to the eye but heavy to the soul. Yet here lies the turning point. To awaken is to finally recognize this inner voice for what it truly is, not truth, but shadow. You must face it not with hatred or denial, but with clarity and courage. For every empath carries within themselves not only light, but also shadow. There is a part of you that longs to be needed, to be indispensable, to be the one who saves. This hidden shadow binds you to envious lovers and draining companions, because on some level, you too secretly feed on their dependence. And thus the relationship becomes a tragic mirror, one in which both are chained. They envy your light, while you cling to their need of you. Both are trapped in a cycle of pain disguised as intimacy. Liberation comes only when you dare to confront your own shadow, only when you admit with honesty, "I am not here to save, I am here to be whole." This confrontation is terrifying because it demands the death of the false self. It asks you to release the identity of the sacrificer, the eternal caretaker, the one who absorbs without limit. And in releasing this false identity, you stand before the abyss of not knowing who you are without it. This abyss is not the end, but the very threshold of individuation. It is the dark night of the soul, the wilderness where all the old maps fail and nothing familiar remains. And yet it is precisely here, in this emptiness, that the true self can finally emerge. In dreams, this often appears as a death motif, lying in a coffin, being buried, or watching an old version of yourself dissolve into the earth. But these are not dreams of doom. They are dreams of transformation. The psyche is declaring the old empath, enslaved by envy, must die so that the sovereign empath may be born. And in this symbolic death, a new power is revealed. The ability to feel without being consumed, to give without being drained, to love without being diminished. When this rebirth occurs, envy begins to lose its sting. You see it not as a threat to your survival, but as a signal, a message written in the language of shadow. You recognize when someone's admiration is laced with resentment, and you no longer deny it, no longer excuse it, no longer carry its weight. Instead, you calmly name it. This is envy. This is not love. And then you step back. You protect your light. You refuse to apologize for it. You begin to understand in the marrow of your being that your sensitivity is sacred. It is not a burden to be squandered on those who refuse to honor it. This becomes the wisdom of the individuated empath, to hold compassion without collapsing into self-betrayal, to see clearly without losing tenderness. And then something remarkable takes place. You begin to attract a different kind of love. For when you stop confusing envy with devotion, you become a magnet for authenticity. Those who are not threatened by your depth, but nourished by it, draw close. Those who have faced their own shadow do not recoil from your brilliance. They rejoice in your light because it reflects their own. In such relationships, envy has no soil to root itself in, only truth, only mutual recognition, only love that strengthens rather than diminishes. Your empathy is not a wound, but a gift. It is celebrated, not resented. You are no longer a mirror that others try desperately to shatter, but a flame that calls forth other flames. A light that does not apologize for existing. This is the higher destiny of the empath, to become not a victim of envy, but a teacher of authenticity, a living proof that sensitivity is strength and that truth can be lived without disguise. By refusing to be diminished, you reveal to others that it is indeed possible to live with depth. By protecting your sensitivity, you show that boundaries are not prisons or punishments, but bridges that connect one soul to another in truth. And by embracing your whole self, shadow included, you silently invite others to do the same, though many will resist. Do not expect the world to reward you for this courage. Many will still envy, many will still pretend, but you will no longer be deceived by their masks. You will no longer mistake ashes for bread or poison for love. You will walk with eyes wide open, and your very presence will become a quiet judgment on pretense. Some will flee from you, unable to face their own reflection. Others will resent you because your light reveals their darkness. Yet a few, the rare ones who are ready, will be drawn to you like moths to a flame. And with them, you will know the joy of love, untainted by envy. Love that does not diminish, but expands. Love that delights in your radiance because it recognizes its own. In the end, the question is not why empaths trigger envy in those who pretend to love them. The deeper question is, what will you do when envy arises? Will you collapse beneath its weight, believing its lies? Or will you stand tall, recognizing it for what it truly is, the rebellion of the shadow? Will you betray yourself to preserve the illusion of love? Or will you guard your soul and wait patiently for the love that does not envy? This is the decision upon which your individuation turns, the crossroads where your destiny as an empath is shaped. I tell you this as one who has wandered the labyrinth of the psyche. The way is difficult, yes, but it is real. Envy will always exist, for as long as there are souls who refuse to face their own depths. But it need not be your master. You can choose to see it, to name it, and to step aside. You can choose to honor your sensitivity as a divine spark, a seed of wholeness planted within you. And when you do, envy becomes powerless. It can hiss, it can sneer, but it cannot consume. So take courage. Do not apologize for your depth. Do not dim your light to comfort those who envy you. Do not mistake pretense for devotion, nor sacrifice your essence for approval. Walk the path of individuation with dignity, for though the way is often lonely, it is the way that leads to truth. And in truth, you will discover love that does not envy, love that delights, love that celebrates your very being. This is the destiny of the empath who chooses to become whole. And when you reach that place, you will look back on those who once pretended to love you and see them with new eyes. You will no longer carry bitterness, but compassion, for you will know that their envy was never about you at all. It was about the shadow they refused to face within themselves. And so, you will release them, not with anger, but with freedom. For you will have learned the final truth, that no envy, no pretense, no shadow can extinguish the light of a soul that has embraced itself fully. This, my friends, is the original message hidden in the envy you awaken. It is not a curse, but a calling. It is the soul's way of telling you, rise, protect your light, and become who you truly are.